Let's now bring out the 42nd President of the United States, Bill Clinton. Yes, 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 yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank Ike Leggett for a heck of an introduction, for his leadership in Montgomery County. I want to thank Peter Franchot, who made such a great case for Hillary and who's done a really good job as Maryland Controller trying to deal with the challenges of inequality and fairness in Maryland and enforce your laws here and do it in a fair way. After they spoke, if I had any sense, I'd just say amen and quit. I'd like to thank Congressman John Sarbanes for coming. He and his father before him have set great traditions in Maryland. I'd like to thank the Prince George's County Executive, Russian Baker, for being here. Delegate Maurice Morales, thank you. Former Maryland Secretary of Aging, Gloria Lala, thank you. Merle Katita, the SEIU 500 leader, and the young organizer who spoke, Michelle and Guafan, thank you all, and thank you for being here. I also want to thank two people who used to be here who aren't anymore, because it's the first time I've had the chance to be here since Ruth Love passed away, but she and Jean organized the very first Hillary fan club in America. And at the time she passed away, we had 170 clubs with 25,000 members. That's pretty good for a little girl from Leisure World. And I think she did a great job, and they did, and I want to thank them and honor their memory. Look, you live in the highest voting precinct in the entire state of Maryland, and you should be proud of it. So the first thing I want to ask you to do is not to break your record down, but break it up. Break it up. Advance voting starts tomorrow for a week, and then there are 3 voting places, I was told, on the premises for Election Day. So I thank you for that. I also want to just echo a couple of points that have been made. You know, when I ran for president, I thought it was a very important election because we were in the economic doldrums, middle-class incomes were declining, poverty was increasing, the debt of the country had been tripled, quadrupled since in the previous 12 years. I thought we could do better, and I thought we could do it together. Now, we've been through this terrible crash 8 years ago, and we're coming back. But I think it's important, you know, it's kind of a crazy election, isn't it? I mean, all over. And it's important that we understand why. Everybody knows, since I spoke for him when he was running for re-election in Charlotte in 2012, that I personally believe President Obama's done a better job than he often gets credit for with this economy and avoiding a depression. But you have to be of a certain age to have enough memory to appreciate that. We have 400 years of good economic data which tell us that not one time in 400 years has any nation on earth endured the kind of crash we did and gotten over it completely in less than 10 years. And yet, we got all our jobs back in 7.5 years. But the wages aren't rising. The simple explanation for the intense passion in both primaries is rooted in the fact that 80% of the American people, after inflation, still hadn't gotten a raise since the crash. And about half the American people are still living on what they were living on the day I left office 15 years ago. I don't know if there are any Irish Americans in the audience, but we just celebrated the 100th anniversary of, well, we haven't quite, well, we passed the date, the day after tomorrow, of the Easter Uprising in Ireland, which launched the independence of the Republic of Ireland. And it's interesting, since Peter mentioned Hillary as the first woman president, that the Irish Declaration of Independence was issued a year before women got to vote here, and 3 times it says in the Declaration, they are building a society that will be equal between women and men, open to people of all religions and backgrounds. They want an inclusive democracy. But at the time they issued it, World War I was waging, and a lot of people were getting killed in Ireland. And the great Irish poet, William Butler Yeats, wrote this powerful poem about Easter, 1916, in which he said, "Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart." And so in places all over America that have been left out and left behind, they keep reading that we're outperforming every other big economy. It's true. They keep reading that we've had 14 million jobs in 5 years, the most since I was president. That's true. They know we've got over 90% of our people with health insurance for the first time in our history. That's true. They know we look way better for the future than any other big economy because we have the youngest, most diverse workforce. And having lost it, I can tell you, in economic terms, youth does matter. Also helps to stabilize Social Security and Medicare, which Hillary promises to protect and promises to improve. And one very important fact, single women on Social Security whose sole source of income basically is a survivor-based income are underfunded, and she wants to raise that. That's a fair thing to do. So you can paint all these pretty pictures. We have the best science and technology base. Every scientific survey says we lead the world. We're in first or second place in our ability to generate electricity from the sun, the wind, other sources. We can beat back global warming and create zillions of jobs doing it. We have a deficit of infrastructure in America. Flint, Michigan's not the only place where children have elevated lead levels in their blood because of bad pipes. And other states and cities, children have elevated lead levels because we never got all the lead paint out of the houses. And it's still flaking and getting into the system of people. Just think what would happen if we hired people to take all the lead off the walls and rip up all the pipes and put down good ones and give all our children a healthy future. You cannot export any of those jobs. They would be jobs here in America that you wouldn't have to build a wall to keep. And they would make a much better future for our country. So we can do that. It's true we've got the best college and university system, but a lot of people are afraid they can't afford it, or they've already afforded it and they're up to their ears in debt. So for me to come here and tell you, because you remember when I was president, that we're just this close to coming back. And we need to get a president who understands that and who understands the only economy that works in a free society is one where there is shared prosperity, where there's a shared sense of community, and where we share political responsibilities instead of fighting with each other all the time and waking up every day happy we can promote gridlock. We've got to have an inclusive approach to this so we can all rise together as we did before. And we can do it. If we have a good jobs plan, we can bring manufacturing jobs back to America. She won a huge victory in Ohio, a very sophisticated manufacturing state that understands we have to think about tomorrow's manufacturing jobs, not yesterday's, and that we got a plan to do it. And in Ohio, the senator that's the most progressive authority on trade, Sherrod Brown, and the Congressman Tim Ryan, who's the head of the manufacturing caucus, both went around the state saying, look, we've read these plans. Her plan will do far more to grow manufacturing jobs in America and support what we're trying to do here in Ohio. We're for her. She won twice as much as the poll said, because people wanted the future. 2/3 of all our new jobs come from small businesses. A lot of you were in them. And yet, the biggest problem we got today is not a threat that the big banks will crash Wall Street. It's that none of the banks are loaning money to small business again. In every year I was president, we were in the top 5 in small business formation. Hillary wants to get back to enforcing the Community Reinvestment Act, which made $800 billion worth of loans when I was president. And she says, we could do over $1 trillion now. And that law is simple. It says every community in which you take deposits, or if you have an ATM machine, banks have an obligation to make some loans in that community and not spend all their money with these gambling, highfalutin financial shenanigans. Give it to small business people and let them grow America the way they always have. And so she thinks that the health care law is not perfect, but it would be a terrible mistake to start again and try to go from 0 to 100 with a single payer system than from going from 90 to 100 with the law we've got. Because there are problems with the law we have and what it doesn't cover. First, all these states are eventually going to have to take the Medicaid expansion, because that's just low-income working people and it makes money for the state budget. The states that haven't taken it are purely for ideological reasons. They just beat up on the president and the Congress and said it was terrible, but everybody that's done it's happy. And I get tickled. There are a couple of Republican states, including my native state of Arkansas, where the poor Republican governor had 12 more Republicans elected to the legislature, all promising to repeal the health care law. Just like the Republicans voted 57 times to repeal it in Congress, and we're still waiting for what their alternative is. So the governor's a good guy, the one that got elected, and he's having to tie himself in knots trying to get the legislature to, they change the title and change a little here and change a little there, trying to get them to vote for what they promised to repeal, because if they don't vote for it, then 250,000 of their constituents are going to lose their health care, and it could flip the state back to us again. So this is going to happen. Then we'll be at 95. Then what are the problems? First of all, we're the only big country in the world that doesn't regulate drug prices. And we have to control prescription drug prices. And the government's got all the market power. We buy these things. Why should we spend your tax money to spend money on drugs that cost people that don't even get taxpayer-funded drugs to have to pay through the nose? It's not right. Second, the insurance market for those who are still in the individual market, not old enough for Medicare, are still trying to get small business insurance, is not working very well in some states. So the cost is too high and the copays and deductibles are way too high. We need, as Hillary recommended in the beginning, a public option for them, or a way of having much, much more competition so the prices will go down. And if we just did those things, we'd get quickly to 100%, and we'd have lower prices and higher quality of health care. And keep in mind, since World War II, no major health reform, not Medicare, not Medicaid, not the Children's Health Insurance Program, which Hillary helped to push when I was president, and which is now a part of the health care law, insuring almost 8.5 million kids. Nothing major has passed without 60 votes to break a filibuster in the Senate. I think we can win the Senate back this year, but no one thinks we'll have 60 votes. No one thinks we'll have 60 votes. So whether we like it or not, we need to do the most good we can as quickly as we can, and that's going from 90 to 100, not 0 to 100, and dealing with the drug problems, the copay and deductible problems, the things that will make us have a healthcare system that all Americans can be proud of. These young people do need help on college. But the best way to do it is to make sure that everybody can emerge from college debt-free by paying the tuition of those who need it, by giving more help to those who need it, and by giving the opportunity to work 10 hours a week and work study funds for those who need that. That won't kill anybody. And it's the only proposal that will actually drive down the cost of college, because that's work that the colleges and universities won't have to pay top dollar for. And then by doing something about the debt. And I want to explain that to all of you here. When I was president, we passed the best loan program and college aid program since the GI Bill. And the economic benefits of it were almost gone by the time I left office because of the explosion in college costs. And then when President Bush got in office, they were still really working well for about 3 years, and then they started dismantling some of what I did. So when President Obama took office and had a Democratic Congress, he passed a slightly bigger one than I did. And then explosion in college costs kept creeping up. And the reason a lot of these young people are in debt that they can't repay is that they had to borrow money outside the federal loan program. So they go over here to a bank and borrow money. You might find this hard to believe, but the only loan in America you cannot refinance at a lower interest rate is a college loan. So she says, first of all, let's let the young people refinance. To give you an idea of what that would mean today, let's suppose we did it today. Overnight, 25 million college students and graduates would save an average of $2,000 apiece just by being able to refinance those loans, and it's high time we did it. It's not right to be prejudiced against college loans. Second thing she wants to do is to take the debt people have already accumulated, and some of them owe $100,000 or more. The average is about 25. But people that went to law school or medical school or something else, they can be way in debt. So we all know that an education is a lifetime asset. Every time I see a group of young people under 30, I tell them that they have an excellent chance of living to be 100 because of changes that have already taken place and the dramatic improvements as a result of the sequencing of the human genome that we're seeing in healthcare. Well, a college education is no less a lifetime asset than a home. So Hillary wants to give everybody the option of taking out a mortgage, in effect, on their education, converting their debt into a 20-year monthly payment system like a mortgage that would be limited, no matter how much you owe, at most to 10% of your after-tax income. And then after 20 years, if it's not all paid back, the rest is forgiven. And if you want to pay it back sooner and you join AmeriCorps for 2 years, the National Service Program that was begun when I was president, expanded under President Obama, and Hillary wants to double it again. If you do that and then come back and do any kind of public service job for a year, you can get almost $24,000 absolutely tax-free and just chunk it at the debt and be free and go on. Now think what this would do for you, for everybody. You'd liberate the energies of millions of young people. How many grandkids do you have still living at home with your kids because they can't pay the debt? They could all move out of their parents' house. Big deal, right? First. Second, that's no small deal for both the parents and the kids. Secondly, suppose they had a job just to pay their college debt, and they had a chance to take a job over here that paid a little less, but they'd love. They can take that job because their debt payment will go down. It's tied to their income. Thirdly, suppose they always wanted to go into business. They wanted to open, say, an organic bakery, and all they needed to borrow was $50,000 or $60,000. They could go to the bank, and that college debt would not destroy their credit score because it's limited to 10% of their after-tax income, first. And second, because small business people often don't make any money for the first year or so they're in business, so their payment would go down. And this is very important. We could liberate the energies of these kids, and they could help to lift America so we could all rise together again for the first time in 20 years. We can do that if we do the right thing. And so I could give you a lot of other examples. Yesterday was Equal Pay Day. We now, among all nations, are only 19th in the world in the percentage of our women in the workforce. That's an economic deterrent to our growth. If we had equal pay, paid leave, there are only 7 countries in the world that don't have it now, and affordable child care, we'd quickly get back in the top 10, and that would cause a lot of economic growth. More people making a living. That's important. So Hillary's idea is do what would make the most jobs, take down the barriers to participating in the workforce, and let us all rise together. Let us all live together. Let us all live in a country where we don't discriminate against anybody based on their race or their orientation or their religion. You know, those young people who did that terrible thing in San Bernardino were converted over the internet to radicalism and killing. So we can put up all the walls you want. Wall between here and Mexico. Shoot, you could put up one between here and Canada. You could create great seawalls on both oceans. You could stop letting planes land here. And you couldn't keep out the social media. We need the moderate Muslims who love this country and hate terrorism to stand with us and work with us and live with us so we can send a different message in this country. And so I agree with what was said by the previous speakers. It would be a good thing to have a woman president. It would be a great thing to have somebody who was qualified to do every aspect of the job. There's only one person you can vote for who served on the Armed Services Committee, worked for the Pentagon on a special committee to design the military of the 21st century, which said, their report, no more big land wars in the Middle East. It's an away game. We can't win that fight. But if somebody there, like the Kurds, are bravely ready to put their lives on the line to protect their children's future and to make safe havens for other people there, we should send the special forces to help them do their jobs, to fill in the blank, to build them up. To have somebody who's been Secretary of State, who's negotiated a successful arms control treaty with Mr. Putin's Russia and gotten it ratified in the Senate, which takes 67 votes, and that's a lot of Republicans. Negotiated the sanctions against Iran, who tripled the number of lives we were saving in Africa and other places with your tax money in fighting AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, and it did not cost you 1 red cent because she did there what we need to do here. She said, buy the generic drugs that the FDA has approved. They're cheaper. We can save more lives with the same amount of money. 3.4 million people are alive today because of that one decision she made. We need somebody who knows that. And so I agree, she's the best prepared. But the real reason you ought to be for her is she's the best change maker. If you look at just what she did as Secretary of State, which I mentioned, what she did as a senator from New York, helping the city recover after 9/11, basically setting up her own economic development operation for upstate New York and Long Island and western New York. I was in Buffalo the other day. Everybody said, oh, Buffalo's a dying city. They'll never amount to anything. It's too cold. Nobody wants to go there to do anything but play hockey. All that stuff. She went there and said, looks like opportunity to me. You've got a great university here. Why don't we set up a center of medical advancement and biometrics and use all these technology discoveries and genomic discoveries? There are 12,000 high-paying new jobs there in this amazing complex. And when she was up there the other day, the guy who did it, he said, I may have built it, but it was her idea. And she helped us. She got us the initial money. She always makes something good happen. When she ran for re-election as a senator, the head of the Farm Bureau on Long Island, which all family farmers, endorsed her. The press said breathlessly, how can you do that? I thought you were a Republican. He said, I thought I was too. He said, but you know, all these politicians, they sound great at election time. All I know is I've been doing this a long time. She is the only one who ever actually did anything for our farmers, and I am for her. And he's still for her, but the story's not as good anymore. He had to move to Florida for health reasons, and they have a closed primary. So he said, boy, I'm mad. Hillary finally made me register as a Democrat so I could vote for her. But I did it anyway. When she was in the White House, I'd said we got children's health insurance program, but the most amazing thing she did was to go to the Republican leader in the House, Tom DeLay. Those of you who remember him know that he made Ted Cruz look mild. And he did not like me very much. But she went to him anyway, and she said, Congressman, I know we don't agree on much. He said, Hillary, do we agree on anything? She said, you love your children. He said, come on, what's that got to do with anything? She said, look, Congressman, I know we disagree on nearly everything, but I also know you adopted those children, and I honor you for that. And she said, we have all these kids in foster care in America, and no one wants to adopt children after infancy. They're afraid they can't shape their lives. People are afraid to adopt children with special needs. They're afraid they can't afford it, and they'll fail financially and as parents. And all these kids are going to age out of foster care with no money to live on, no place to go, no job training, no access to college, nothing. We're just going to throw them on society. It's wrong. We can't do it. And he said, well, what do you want to do about it? She said, well, first, let's start with the fact that you're a Republican. And so your answer to everything is tax cuts. In this case, you could be right. Let's give a whopping tax credit to anybody who will adopt a child after infancy, and a bigger one for people who will adopt children with special needs. And then you have to spend some money to give them the support services they need, the new parents, and to help these kids that are aging out. Guess what? All I had to do was sign the bill, and before I left office, there had been an 80% increase in the adoption of children out of foster care. She always makes something good happen. And it's been that way as long as I've known her. You know, we were famously close to the state of Israel, and I worked hard on peace. And Hillary and I were both very involved with the late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and his wife and family. And I just went back to Israel for the 20th anniversary of his passing. And there were 100,000 people in the street, in the square named after him where he lost his life, still believing in peace. But Israel is also a place of incredible social reform and economic breakthroughs. So one day back in the 80s, when nobody in America had preschool, and I was a governor, Hillary came in where I was sitting, and she said, I got a great idea. I said, what is it? She said, all these poor kids in the Mississippi Delta and in the Ozark Mountains, we had 6 of the poorest counties in America, 3 white, 3 African American, predominantly. She said they're all going to start school. They don't have a chance to learn. Their parents can't read, write, sometimes can't even count. They never had any access to education. They're never going to catch up. But she said, I read about this program in Israel for immigrants whose parents don't speak Hebrew or English, who can't read, write, or count, and they teach the parents to learn with the teachers, with the kids, so that the parents become their children's first teacher, and the kids are doing great. They caught up almost overnight. I said, it sounds great. What are we going to do about it? That's Israel. She said, oh, I did it. I called the woman who founded the program in Israel, and she'll be here in 10 days. And the next thing I knew, I was being dragged around to all these little preschool graduations, watching these mothers cry because they could read, write, and count and teach their children. The next thing I knew, this program was in 26 states. And today, all over this country, there are thousands and thousands of people under 40 who started life in better shape and went further because she always makes something good happen. They don't have any idea she had anything to do with their development, and she didn't care. She just wanted to make something good happen. And I could go on and on. A friend of mine, after Hillary won South Carolina with 73% of the vote and Georgia with about that much, and then got 78% in Alabama, a friend of mine who'd been active in the civil rights movement called me and he said, I just read that Hillary got 93% of the African-American vote in Alabama. That can't be possible, can it? I said, yeah, and she also won a majority of the white vote. And he said, how'd that happen? And I said, well, for one reason, when she got out of law school, instead of going into a fancy law firm, she went to work for the Children's Defense Fund. And she went to South Carolina to find out about teenagers being kept in jail with adults, mostly African-American kids. And they filed a report on what they found, and it changed the whole juvenile justice system in South Carolina. They didn't forget that. Then she went to Alabama, where they were trying to perpetrate illegally segregated schools by calling them private academies and claiming tax credits for them to cover the cost of building and operating them. But no one had ever proved that that's what they were doing. So Hillary, more than 40 years ago, went down there and posed as a housewife moving to Dothan, Alabama, whose husband got a job there, and walked herself into one of these academies and sat down all alone and interviewed for letting her kid into school. And after about 5 minutes of small talk, she said, look, let's just get to the bottom line here. Yes or no? If I put my son here, will he be in an all-white school? And the guy said, absolutely. She had him. They lost their tax exemption. Schools all over the state lost their tax exemption. Schools all over the South lost their tax exemption. She always finds a way to make something good happen. That's what you need in a president today. So that's my pitch. We need your support in Maryland. We need you to talk to your friends and neighbors. If you got any friends and neighbors in New York or Pennsylvania or Delaware or Connecticut or Rhode Island, we'd appreciate them too. Yes, it's true. She's the best qualified by experience and delivery. I believe she has by far the best ideas so that we can grow together and live together. I believe I would trust her with anything to make these Supreme Court appointments. There's a vacancy here, and there could be 3. We don't need any more cases that restrict voting rights. We need to expand them. We don't need any more state decisions that try to break unions. We need to protect the right to organize, to try to even act people. We don't need any more decisions like the Citizens United case that say since freedom of speech is available to all of us, money's a part of your speech, so we want to make the billionaire and the minimum wage worker equally free to spend whatever they want on politics. I used to teach constitutional law. If somebody had given me that answer, I'd have flunked them. That's the law of the land now. We got to change that. But the real reason you should elect her is she's the best change maker, the best I've ever known. For 45 years, I met her 45 years ago, last month. She is the best change maker I've ever known. And she will do what is necessary as president so we can all rise together. Thank you, and God bless you.